Maya was 8 years old. She had rules to follow all day long. At school, there were special rules. Does anybody remember what kind of rules you used to have at school?
Don't run.
Don't run.
No talking in class.
Oh, yeah, no talking in class.
Don't put a snake in the teacher's drawer.
Don't put a snake in the teacher's drawer. They must have loved you, Polly. I can just imagine. So at school, Maya had to raise their hand to talk. They could only eat if it was lunchtime or snack time. They needed to get a bathroom pass if they wanted to go to the bathroom. And of course, they were not allowed to copy anybody else's work. That's a big no-no. Maya also had rules at home. What might be some rules you have at home? Don't eat in the living room. Don't eat in your bedroom. That was a big one for our kids. And use your indoor voice. Yeah. What else? My dad was big about closed kitchen cupboards. Don't put snake in your parents'. Okay, all right. So here's Maya's rule. She had to go to bed at 8 o'clock. They were never allowed to hit their younger sibling, even though their sibling hit first. They had to eat vegetables, and they could watch television for half an hour every day. Now, there were also special rules at the congregation. We don't have a lot of kids here now, but do you guys remember like some of the rules that you might have had up for inflicted, I was going to say, told your children about at church? Do you remember? Yes. Don't jump off the landing when we had the two-floor building, yes. I remember when I was an intern at First Universalist, I tracked down kids who had those sneakers that had the wheels on them because they would zoom around the fellowship hall and freak out everybody who, was a little bit unstable in terms of mobility. That was a big rule. So here's what Maya had to do. She had to tell an adult if she was leaving the room to go somewhere else or to go to the bathroom. She had to use an indoor voice, Kai, you were right. And she was expected to be friendly and welcoming to everyone. God, Maya was sick and tired of all those rules. One day, they decided they just wanted one rule to follow, one very important rule to take the place of all of those other rules. So, Maya asked Uncle Guna what he thought was the most important rule of all. He told them that in his religion, Hinduism, it is said, "This is the sum of duty, to do nothing to others which would cause them pain." Sounds kind of good, right? Sounds like a good rule. Okay, so then Maya asked their next door neighbor, Claire, what they thought was the most important rule of all. Claire told Maya that a teacher from the Buddhist religion had said, "Do not do to others what would hurt you." Kind of a good idea, right? Kind of be kind, do things that, wouldn't hurt anybody. Anybody heard rules such as that before? Did any of your parents raise you with any of those rules, or did you hear those from other people? Yep, heads are nodding here. I don't know about you guys online. Maya had a best friend, Adam. And they asked Adam what they thought was the most important rule. And Adam told Maya that at their Jewish synagogue, they learned Hebrew scripture teaches, "You shall love thy neighbor as thyself." Another friend, of Maya's, told them that their Catholic church had that same rule. Kind of amazing, right? Now we're hearing some things repeating. Then Maya asked their friend Malik what they thought was the most important rule. And Malik said that in their religion, which was Islam, they say, "None of you truly believes until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself." Kind of hearing some repeated patterns here, huh? So Maya asked their Uncle Greg what he thought was the most important rule, and Uncle Greg said that when he does pagan magic, he always follows the rule, "And ye harm none, do what you will." He told Maya that that means he cannot do anything that would hurt another living being. Maya thought about all these answers that they had heard. Maya wrote them all down, one at a time. This is the sum of duty, to do nothing to others which would cause them pain. Do not do to others what would hurt you. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. None of you truly believes until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. And ye harm none, do what you will. On Sunday morning, Maya took this list of rules to their Unitarian Universalist congregation, and Maya showed it to their minister, Rev. Marta, and asked Rev. Marta what she thought was the most important. Rev. Marta said, I noticed that these rules are all very similar. They're kind of different versions of a rule that some people call the Golden Rule. What do you think's the most important rule? Maya paused for a moment, and then Maya said slowly, I think love is the golden rule. When we are loving, then we don't hurt other people or cause them pain. We wish for others what we would wish for ourselves, and we love our neighbors as ourselves. That sounds like the most important rule to me, said Rev. Marta, and they agreed that love is the golden rule. So, this morning, let me switch. Let me give Brian a little challenge. I am delighted to bring somebody into our circle of love and care, someone who cares about children and cares about family. And it is our new Director of Family Ministry, Jill Carlson. Jill, will you come up here? Woo! This is Jill's first service with us, so I hope that you will have an opportunity to welcome her and to introduce yourself to her today and in the weeks to come, because it's a lot to get introduced just once. I want to thank Brian Hill over there, Lori Gazda, and Liz Haworth, who's in the back, for helping with the interview process. So let me tell you a little bit about Jill while she stands here next to me. Jill has been a member and on staff at Minnesota Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Bloomington. She has demonstrated creativity, a commitment to growth, and a comfort with outreach. She's kind of a go-getter, which is sort of lovely. Over the years, Jill has facilitated programming for families, youth, and adults. A sample of successful activities she organized include a Mall of America scavenger hunt, lock-ins, and game nights. She also facilitated the OWLS program at Minnesota Valley MVUUF as a volunteer. Jill is a licensed mental health counselor, so she has a deep understanding of relationship building and confidentiality. Her academic training provides her with cultural competency and a knowledge of the human lifespan development that's going to complement our mission and our program goals. At this point, Jill's working 10 hours a week as the Director of Family Ministry, and she'll be spending 2 Sundays a month with us. So she'll, kind of be working with volunteers and developing programs. She's already proven to be super efficient. She is insightful and thoughtful and excited about her role. So look for this Thursday's e-news update for a column from her, including her office hours and how to be in touch. Do you want to just let people hear your voice in a quick greeting?
Thank you all for the warm welcome. I'd also like to give a shout out to my family who's also here, my husband Kevin and my son Wesley. He's an 11-year-old at Rosemont Middle School.
Woo! Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Thanks. Appreciate it. I hope this will be a long and fruitful relationship. It's really lovely to have Jill on staff, and her depth of knowledge and lived experience in Unitarian Universalism, I think, is a real gift. So I'm excited to bring her onto staff.
This is a reflection by Reverend Tess Baumberger on the Article 2 graphic shown on the screen. But let me say a little bit about the graphic. As I think many of you know, I served on the UUA Board of Trustees, and part of my responsibilities included serving as one of the board liaisons to the Article 2 Study Commission, which is the group that was charged with coming up with a new revision of our principles, purposes, and what we came up with was a set of values. And the draft that was released about 1.5 years ago inspired a UU to gift us with this beautiful image of a flower petal with love at the center. And what we really loved about this image is it captured the commission's sense that we didn't want any one of these images, values, to take preeminence over every other one. And we have a set of principles now, and we're used to kind of talking about the first principle, and it's kind of taken on the sense that that was somehow ranked, which it never was. But it's a lot harder to get a ranking out of a flower petal. And so it's got color, it's, each of the little values has color, but the main thing is that love is at the center. So from Tess Baumberger, at the center of this image is love, the heart of universalism, that eternal and all-conquering force. Around it and from it flows values that express that love. This love that sits at the center of this image is not sentimental love or romantic love. It is the love we grow in our communities, a deep and abiding love that affirms our worth no matter what we do or don't achieve or believe. This love is a belief in ourselves and in one another that nothing can rip apart. This love affirms our interdependence. It is a love that says we all deserve to be loved, whether we have been hurt or have hurt others. For some of us, the love at the center of this image includes a divine love that holds us tenderly and tightly. It is a fierce, protective, and liberating love. It is a hopeful love, a love that inspires people of goodwill and sacrificial spirit to overcome evil and to make this earth as heavenly as possible. Just and equitable, pluralistic, affirming of all people, of all nations, all races, and all creeds. Ours is and always has been a heretical faith, a courageous faith, a covenantal faith, and a faith that calls us to work with that all-conquering, liberating love to make this earth a heaven.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you for your work on the board and with the Article 2 Commission. My spiritual director is constantly talking to me about what a murky time this is. Right now, it feels like muddy waters are all around us, she says. It's hard to gain a sure footing. It's hard to maintain hope. It's hard to be in a state of constant change and unknowing. She said, at this point in time, we need to look for ways to have our hearts open and to become alive. In our evolving faith, our living tradition, we have built in the requirement to examine our central statements, our ideas, our documents that are agreed upon as an association of congregations on a regular basis. We're actually behind a bit in terms of the schedule of rewriting our principles and our purposes. This Article 2, which Kathy talked about, which is looking at our vision and our values and our covenant. Our current principles and purposes were adopted in 1985. And prior to that, the language stood as what was adopted in 1961, which was when the Unitarians and the Universalist merged to become Unitarian Universalist. If we vote to approve the Article 2 language in this coming 2024 General Assembly this June, it will have been 39 years after the principles and purposes that are proposed, that we have right now, were put together. So I want you to just take a second to think of 1985. Some of us may not be able to think of 1985. Think of yourself in 1985. Think of the world in 1985. As you have evolved as a person, you've gone through so many changes, and so much has changed in the culture and the world around us. I'm super grateful that we have a faith that wants to remain relevant, that wants to lean into what is versus holding on to what was. The current principles are awesome. They make a beautiful rainbow bookmark. I did order bookmarks with the new thing on it, but they're not here yet, so they'll be here next week. They're in the mail. I did get that email. But the old ones are awesome, and so many of us became UUs with that language in mind. They were steering us, guiding us, informing our faith. but really they're hard to remember. I think there was one person in the congregation who could actually remember all of them. And they lack one central word, which is love. Love is mentioned in our current sources in reference to the Judeo-Christian teachings. The language of our current sources say that the living tradition which we share draws from many sources, and then there's a list. And one of them is Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Sounds familiar, right? Similar language of loving our neighbors as ourselves was also in the original principles created in 1961. Remember, 1961 is that merging date, and what the language was then was, in accordance with these corporate principles, the members of the Unitarian Universalist Association, dedicated to the principles of a free faith, unite in seeking to cherish and spread the universal truths taught by the great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immemorably summarized in the Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man. So that was the 1961. Needless to say, though, there were a lot of women who rewrote those in 1985, so there was less of that gendered language. Yes, the coupling of God and love can be found throughout documents in our history, which are called articles of faith. They were both in early Unitarianism and early Universalism. These articles of faith were professions of belief. They were not litmus tests as to whether you could join the congregation. And the nature of God in those was described as having the nature of love and an unchangeable love. Many UU congregations still use the original language of a Blake covenant, a Unitarian covenant, written by James Villa Blake in 1894. If you've been to other congregations, you may be familiar with it. We used to say it together at First Universalist. I don't know if they still say it today. This is what it is. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. There's a similar Universalist covenant written by Griswold Williams in 1933, very similar feel to that covenant, but it begins with love is the doctrine of this church. I doubt that would fly at this moment, but that was the 33 language. During my video last week, I used a poem talking about that there's a thread you follow, and I talked about how there is this thread of a call of love that has been part of Unitarianism and Universalism over time. And as we move into this new language of Article 2, love not only exists, but it's at the very center. It's at the core of the values that inform our faith. If we were to ask, what would our religious ancestors think? As my colleague Monica Dobbins said, the load-bearing pillars from our past are still standing. I think our ancestors would be happy. They could rest assured that that thread of love is moving forward, even if the language is a little different when it comes to our sources. Our language of faith in that model that Kathy showed you is a little bit more generalized. It's under the heading of pluralism, and it says, as it describes pluralism, that we celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experiences, and theology. So it's kind of a more general statement. Love, the word love, the idea of love, can sometimes feel elusive or hard to grasp. It's often simplified into love between two people who fall for each other, or the obligatory love that is expected of us in our primary training camp for love, which is our family of origin. Because we're all part of this human experiment, most of us have been taught love imperfectly, sometimes in ways that have twisted love and power and harm. Some of us had needed to learn how to love in healthy ways later in our lives. Love in its essence is really hard to grasp, and I know that for some who are more comfortable in the realm of science and reason, love can feel mushy or sentimental. It's not really a word that belongs among strangers or even folks you know as dear congregants. I stumbled upon this definition written by Scott Peck. I don't know if you guys remember him. He wrote The Road Less Traveled, a big book in the past. He says that love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely, both in intention and in action. Will also implies a choice. We do not have love. We choose love. Let me repeat that. The will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both intention and action. Will also implies a choice. We don't have love. We choose love. The love that's at the center of our core values, it is not a passive love. It's not a love we look for in that song, like that we're looking for love in all the wrong places. It's not the feeling of love. It's love as a verb. It's love as a practice. Bell Hooks wrote a book titled All About Love, and in it she says, to truly love, we must learn to various ingredients. Here they are: care, affection, recognition, respect, commitment, trust, as well as honest and open communication. It's a lot. It's a lot to sit behind this word of love. Her ingredients are as profound and as intense as those of Richard Rohr. Kathy had sent me an original quote by Richard Rohr. He's a progressive Franciscan priest, and this is kind of what was fueled our topic for the service. He wrote, if love is the soul of Christian existence, it must be at the heart of every other Christian virtue. Now you can imagine you virtues instead, if you want to identify with what Rohr is saying. For example, justice without love is legalism. Faith without love is ideology. Hope without love is self-centeredness. Without love is self-abasement. Fortitude without love is recklessness. Generosity without love is extravagance. Care without love is mere duty. Fidelity without love is servitude. Every expression of love, says Rohr. Every virtue is an expression of love, says Rohr. No virtue is really a virtue unless it is informed or permeated by love. This is what Article 2 means. By having love at the center of our value, every value is the expression of love. No value has any real value unless it is permeated or informed by love. Faith communities like ours are a place where we are asked to practice love. We practice love by staying in relationship with people who might otherwise be folks we'd turn away from if we weren't in community with them. We practice love by saying yes to leadership or service, by reaching out to each other, by offering rides or food, or by listening without judgment and an open heart. Love stretches us. It changes us. It makes us better people. Love is learning about white supremacy, the full range of gender expression, what it's like to have a physical or mental disability, and changing our thought process and behavior as we come to understand more about people who are different from ourselves. My colleagues, Monica Dopkins, described wokeness, I thought this was so interesting, as learning new ways to love previously unfamiliar people. Learning new ways to love previously unfamiliar people. We wake up when we come into relationship with folks we may not have known before and understand their struggles and their lives in a different way. Every time I stand before you on Sunday mornings, those words of courageous love stand behind me. What does courageous love look like? For each of us, that'll be different because we are different people in different chapters of our lives. James Baldwin is often quoted in relation to the idea of love that would be described as courageous love. I think the reason he is quoted so often is because he, like Hooks and Peck, depends on the call and the nature of love, deepens the call and the nature of love. Baldwin says love is a battle. Love is a war. Love is growing up. In his book, Fire Next Time, Baldwin says, love takes the mask that we fear we cannot live without and know that we cannot live within. He continues, I use the word love here, not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace. Not the infantile American sense of being happy, but in the tough, universal sense of quest and daring and growth. Love as a state of being, a state of grace, a tough and universal sense and daring and growth. So we're pretty far from that squishy, star-eyed, gooey love that's often depicted in romances. The love we are talking about today is messy and it's complicated and it's challenging as well as inspiring. At our core, I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be loved or be loving, but there's a range of comfort with moving into the language of love and belovedness. The love at the center of Article 2, it's a muscular and it's a strong love. Listen to the language that's described with that flower image. So this is the language that Article 2 wrote. Love is the power that holds us together and it's at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. There's an accountability there to one another. To stay faithful to love, we need to practice spiritual discipline. I certainly know from personal experience that I need to pay attention to my spirit, to continue to do my spiritual maintenance, if you will, in order to remain really loving. I do this by being diligent with my spiritual practice. My most consistent ones are walking and qigong, working with my spiritual director, writing morning pages, taking a moment in the afternoon to sit with an espresso, I like that one, and do some intentional breathing. Why bother with all of it? I pay attention to my spirit because I know that without it, I intentionally move into fear and hatred and cynicism and despair. And to let myself slide into those feelings is to neglect the power of love. When I fall away from spiritual practices, I'm choosing to let all of that divides us occupy my spirit versus opening up to that which unites. I'm letting the emotions and the posture that leads to separation and isolation override my spirit. Just think of this series of gray days we've had. Oof-da. Day after day after day, we have been confronted by gray. That's how I feel when I abandon love and the practices that open up my heart to love. Without being intentional about love, we can exist in these short and long stretches without a crack of sunshine in the grayness. We really can't control the weather, but we can control our own inner emotional environment or spirit. We can choose to focus on and only allow in gray and discouraging division and despair, or we can lean into love. And if we choose to practice love here or in other parts of our life, we will find that love grows exponentially, and despair and division and discouragement are diminished. When we practice love in this community, we develop strength to practice love beyond this community. Sometimes that looks like kindness. Other times that looks like justice. Courageous love is an action verb and is along the line of what Martin Luther King Jr. famously described when he said, power is what love is. Power without love is reckless and abusive. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. That's so harsh. It's so true and it's so hard to hear. He says, power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. The previous UUA president, Susan Frederick Gray, says, "It is this understanding of love that formed one of the most precious gifts Unitarian Universalism has given me. The gift of religion that teaches that the work of justice is inseparable from a faith rooted in love." We are still growing and learning. Courageous love isn't ever going to be something that we perfect. It's too demanding to even try to keep score. Courageous love is an aspiration, just as Article 2 is. The Article 2 Commission wrote, "The Unitarian Universalist Association will actively engage with members in the transformation of the world through liberating love." As Unitarian Universalists, we draw from our heritage of freedom and reason and hope and courage, building on that foundation of love. Susan Frederick Gray said, she asked the question, how are we to live? I think that's a profound and important question. Living into the practices of beloved community, it's not just an intellectual exercise. It's not like we get to check some boxes when we get everything right and take pride in our accomplishments. Fundamentally, living into beloved community is spiritual work, deeply spiritual work. And it calls us to lean into the theological callings of our faith. So here we go, guys. Let us be students of love. Let us be courageous in our loving, recognizing that this place where we can practice active love, it calls us to each other, lovingly back. We have to sometimes call each other lovingly back if we go astray, and let love guide us as we move forward with decisions in our own lives and the life of the congregation and the life of the larger society. Let this be a love that connects us to one another and that affirms our interdependence. I remember learning about social movements and political movements. I don't know if any of you have studied that, and how all movements have a central message. So the central conservative message in this country at this time and for some time has been fear, exclusion, and scarcity. Fear your neighbor. Fear those who are different. Fear those who cross the border. Fear body autonomy, and fear economic or environmental regulation. Fear is a powerful and compelling message for so many, but let us not succumb to that message, and instead let us side with love and the redeeming power of love. Bell Hooks speaks words of warning. She writes, "I feel our nations turning away from love, moving into the wilderness of spirit so intense that we may never find our way home again. I write of love to bear witness to the danger in this movement and to call for a return of love." I return to Susan Frederick Gray words before I close. To be a Unitarian Universalist in the context of a pained and unjust world is to be moved by a love that recognizes and honors our interdependence. It's my hope that we don't turn away from responding to these times with our faith, our worship, and our ways of nurturing community. May all of these offer us deeper spiritual practices that cultivate the sustenance we need to be powerful, faithful forces of love and of justice. May it be so, and amen.
We close our service today with these words, "To Invoke Love" by Reverend Sean Parker Dennison from Breaking and Blessing. To invoke love is to ask for a hug from a thunderstorm, spill tea in the lap of the infinite trickster, to make the biggest, most embarrassing mistake of your life in front of everyone who matters.
To invoke love is to never know if it will come softly with the nuzzle of a beloved dog, or pounce right on your chest with the strength of a lioness protecting her cub, her pride, her homeland.
To invoke love is to take the risk of inviting chaos, to visit the spaces you spent so much time making tidy, and you watch as the breath of life scatters everything you have only just folded and put away.
To invoke love is to allow for the possibility that your words and your actions might become so empowered you can no longer believe in apathy or in the self-righteous idea that nothing can change.
To invoke love is to give up self-deprecation, false humility, pride, to consider yourself worthy to be made whole, willing to encounter love that will never let us or each other go.
To invoke love is to guard against assumptions, take care with our words, and practice forgiveness. Not as an ethereal idea, but right here, in the messy midst of our imperfect lives.
To invoke love is to approach each day and every person with wonder, anticipating love's arrival. Is this the moment? Is this love's grand entrance? Is this person the embodiment of love? Am I the one?
To invoke love is to play the fool, the one more concerned with loving than with appearance or reputation, the one willing and ready to be vulnerable, abandoning anything that gets in love's way.
To invoke love is to be ready to become love, here, now, in everything we do. Are you ready?
It's time that we extinguish our chalice, both here and at home, if you lit one. We will share the words on the screen so that everybody can join in reading. Those of you at home will be muted, so please feel free to read aloud. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. The service is almost over. Remember to check your email and the website to stay engaged with what's happening. We will gather next Sunday when Kevin Sitter, who's in the other room, and I will be leading the service at 10:30. Next Sunday is a second Sunday, so it's intentionally more interactive. We're going to have time during the service for you to share stories about transformative or liberating love. These can be breakthrough stories about self-love or stories about moments in your life when love changed something in you. Something shifted as part of an experience of being loved or part of a loving community.